I think everybody was here last time, but to introduce everybody up here, Chef Bryan Skedling, Wisconsin native. Don't hold that against him. First came to Greenbrier in 2002. He left for a little while in 2007, but then came back as the executive sous chef in 2009 and has been our executive chef since 2013. So, Chef Bryan Skedling, we appreciate you being here.
Of course.
And then Steve and Julie Lazarus, longtime guests to Greenbrier. How long have you guys been coming to Greenbrier?
Well, I've been coming since the early 70s. My grandparents used to bring us, the whole entire family down for Easter every single year, and it was like 24 of us, and we thought the Greenbrier was the best place in the whole world, and so many good memories over the years, and family stories, and you know, before I was born, they used to come down on the train, and so it started way back before I was born. And luckily, I met Steve, and I never thought anybody would enjoy the Greenbrier more than me, but, and yeah, it's just been such a special place. And I actually worked for the Dorothy Draper Company for a long time with Carlton, and so it was just more memories, and the traditions kept on
So as we started to put this together, we knew we wanted some culinary piece. So much to focus on in the culinary world, the history of the apprenticeship program and just the history of the food here. But we wanted to kind of narrow it down because we want to do this every year. So we want to have something else to talk about next year. So Chef Skedling said, why don't we talk about menus? And we knew the Lazarus were the place to go for the most extensive menu collection. So as you walk, if you look around the room when we're finished, you can walk around and see some of their amazing collection on display. And they provided a lot of the slides that they're going to look at today. So we appreciate you guys being here and sharing your collection and your knowledge. And then Dr. Bob, we introduced him once. We'll introduce you again. He's still our historian emeritus. If he does well in this, we might keep him for a little longer.
All right,
We'll see. But we just wanted to kind of go through some of the menus over the years, look at how the food has evolved, how the design of the menus has evolved, and I think the menus really tell a big part of the culinary story if you look at them. So we will get started in the 1800s. As most of you probably know, the first hotel built in 1858, Grand Central Hotel, became known as the White and then later the Old White. But here are a couple of the menus presented there at the Old White. And Chef, what are maybe some of the things that jump out to you on those menus that are maybe unique?
So this one is the one 1872 on the far right. This is the oldest menu that I have, and I only have a scanned copy like this. But we were serving chocolate ice cream back then. When you look at old cookbooks, I think of some different chefs back in the late 1800s, and just the way that they would have to store things because there's no refrigeration, but yet the Greenbriers doing ice cream is pretty amazing. And also too is the bread puddings on the menu. So we've been serving the bread pudding technically since 1872. At least we have a document here that states that otherwise. And the other thing I always think of. Just some of these very old school menus is I always love seeing the pricing on it. I mean, obviously we live in an era with inflation and everything going on, but it always just kind of cracks me up. And then just through the years, just to kind of segue just a touch real quick, is just the different ways that people eat nowadays versus way back when. And I'll get into some other things as we continue.
As you, Chef, obviously know a whole lot about the main dining room and the kitchen here. What do you know about the kitchen and the dining room at the Old White?
You know, I don't have any pictures. I've never heard anything. I mean, Chef Schlesinger was the first chef here back in, I believe it was 1917 or 1919, if I remember. And then he, of course, came back for about 2 or 3 years when Dorothy Draper came in. But he left really around the time when Ashford Hospital came about, if I remember correctly. But the oldest picture I have are actually of him sitting in the main kitchen, and that was from Dr. Conte.
Do you know anything about the dining room, Bob?
There's only one photo I found down at the Valentine Museum years ago, and I've used it in the book. I mean, it's just these columns. I think it's 1,200 people in the main dining room of the Old White, which is more. We can feed that many, maybe in Colonial Hall. This was actually a bigger resort. The menus on the left are from the 1880s. This is actually a bigger resort then in terms of the number of people we can accommodate. And that's because the Old White Hotel wasn't that big. It had maybe 225 rooms, but there were a lot more cottages. And back then, you stayed in it. People who knew the Greenbrier stayed in the cottages. And if you didn't know anybody, you stayed in the hotel. But it was a giant dining room, and I always look at that menu. These are exceedingly rare, incidentally. Do you have one of those 1880s menus? Yeah, I guess that's from our collection.
It is.
And I maybe have 2 menus from the 1880s, so they're extremely rare. And there's a lot of damn food there. That's the thing that I always.
They ate a
They
lot.
ate a lot,
And I
yeah.
went to the different times that they would eat. Breakfast 7 to 10:30, dinner was 2 to 4, and then supper was 6:30 to 8:30.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you don't hear supper that often. You
Right.
did in Wisconsin growing up, but you're around here a lot.
But they're gonna do some serious dancing after that.
So that would move to 1913, and the current Greenbrier Hotel is built, and the menu on the left is actually the menu that chef will be recreating tomorrow. It's the first dinner served here at the Greenbrier. What are some of the highlights of that menu, chef?
You know, one thing I want to touch on is what I find also comical about some of the menus. And I got this from Mr. Stoner years and years ago, because I would ask him, when I was looking, it was actually this very menu, because I was looking at doing this menu on the 100th anniversary of the Greenbrier. And I called him and I asked him, so Mr. Stoner was the executive director of food here for really up until 2004 or 5, I believe it was. But he graduated the apprenticeship program in '69. So he worked here as the executive food director for about 37 years. So I called him and I asked him, I said, Mr. Stoner, what are Palms, Virginia? He goes, I have no idea. He goes, the beauty of that was, he goes, one day it could be mashed potatoes, the other day it could be boiled potatoes. He goes, but I didn't have to commit to that. So I always thought, because a lot of times back then they would do the menus every day, and that was kind of like the cool thing to do. And that was their way to make it easy on themselves, was to just be very vague. I'll use the example I use now, is I just put tomato on the menu. I can do heirloom tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, sliced tomatoes. They at least tomatoes on the menu, right? So that's what they did there.
So like when
Other than that, on this, turtle soup is very, very popular all the way up until really the 60s, maybe early 70s. So a lot of our menus from those eras really have turtle soup. It can be very difficult to get these days. Crudité, your celery, your olives, and things like that. And then I'm always been kind of impressed how many different courses that they had as well too. We're not doing that many courses tomorrow night. Not everyone likes to eat that long anymore. You know? I mean, it's just, this was entertainment. There's no TV. There's no one had to get back to the NFL football game. This was their entertainment, if you would. So
It is amazing you brought up that turtle soup. As we go through these, it appears on menu after menu after, and it changes, the name changes sometimes. I think one time it's Key West turtle soup.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Green turtle soup.
Right.
yep.
The interesting thing about that menu to me is it says for the press. And you note the date is September 28th. The hotel didn't open until October 1st, so this was sort of a soft opening. The press meant the Gridiron Club. Now, the Gridiron Club is this very exclusive journalism club. It's still there in Washington. It goes back to like the 1880s. And it's a very small membership. I mean, 50 to 70 members, veteran journalists. And they have a dinner every year, white tie. And I know all this because Ted Kleisner, who was a prisoner, and his twin brother Fred, Ted and Fred, Fred managed the hotel in Washington where they always had their dinner. Now you hear about the Washington Correspondents' dinner that they televise. That's like anybody can go to that. But to go to the Gridiron Club, and again, it's the politicians and the journalists kind of roasting each other, very, very formal. And then they used to come here. I hear people like Dale Amick used to talk about how they come down by train, and our room service people go up to Washington and wine and dine them. And I can remember walking by the Crystal Dining Room once, and there they were, having dinner in there. So both Ted and Fred had hosted the Gridiron Club, and that's why they still go every year to these very, very formal, very elaborate dinners. And so the Gridiron Club that's who the press was in that menu.
I do want to go back real quick, Cam, because two of my favorite menus that Steve and Julie have are these two right here. They're the only originals I've ever seen from actually 1913. And then just the artwork on the top, and I forget, because they brought them with them. I don't remember what side of the room that they're on.
Yeah, I think they're over there.
I encourage everyone to take a look at that before you leave. I mean,
What
to
are
me,
the-
it's priceless. I
What are
mean,
the dates on those, Chip?
Well, it turns out-
August 24th, 1913.
That's what I was gonna ask about. That's before the opening, right?
Yes, that's actually a rendering of what the Greenbrier is going to look like, the one on the left. And those are postcards. They're perforated. And so I would kill for some of the things that Steve has.
Oh, yeah.
And these would be that. And the other thing, a little insider tip, on the top it says the manager, a guy named Adams.
George Adams. Yeah.
George Adams. If you're a postcard person, if it says George Adams, it's only going to be like 1910 to 1913. Because when the Greenbrier opened, he was out of here. And then the guy who ran the Plaza Hotel in New York, Frederick Sterry, became the manager of the Greenbrier. And to find these intact, to find the menu with the postcard intact, this is why I would kill to have these things. So these meals would have been served in the old white.
One of the 1920s, and the picture is actually a picture in our kitchen from the 1920s,
Yeah.
which is
They didn't take many pictures of the kitchen back then.
Oh, that's so special.
But the two menus here are Christmas and Thanksgiving menus, and I thought those were interesting. That you see a lot of the traditional things that we still see on Christmas and Thanksgiving menus, but there's also some unique things. Anything that jumps out at you, Chef?
Let's see, because I just found this menu. I think Dr. Bob sent it to us just a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago. I'd never seen a 1928 Christmas menu. Where did I see that? It was great to see everyone eating caviar, no doubt about that. No, nothing really just sticks out on this one, to be honest.
I thought the artwork on both of them was
Yeah,
quite
It's
interesting.
phenomenal, yeah.
And back then Christmas couldn't have been many people. Christmas doesn't become a big deal here until the 70s. And I think in 1928, there couldn't have been many people here at Christmas. Thanksgiving, maybe more. Thanksgiving is funny. It's always very popular. A lot of kids who are off at college would come and meet their parents here for Thanksgiving.
Okay, and we'll move into the 1930s. Some really interesting menus here. The one on the left actually is the International Marimba Symphony Orchestra in 1935, and there's actually a picture there of that orchestra performing. A really neat.
Now, can you imagine that many marimbas? And that's in the Cameo Ballroom. And
You
they
really
were
need
about,
earplugs for that, huh?
they were about to go on a European tour, and they stopped here. Apparently, this is broadcast live on radio, and then they went off on this European tour. And I didn't realize, until good old Steve came along, that they had their own menu that night. Yeah, it's just a great photo. And I would kill to have heard that concert. Well, I couldn't kill.
There's a lot of themes in here, Bob, of you killing for different
The theme.
things. Move over this way.
Yeah.
The Easter menu there, I think that's a really, really neat design too. And then on the right is a breakfast menu. And Chef, I was going to ask you about this. One of the things that really jumped out at me, first of all, is $1.25 a person. So I was wondering if I could maybe get that deal tomorrow morning.
Sure.
I think for History Weekend, we should.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean?
Yeah, historical pricing, yeah.
But
I was impressed with the number of fish items.
that's what I was getting ready to say. That was what jumped out to me in that menu.
Yeah.
So many different fish items with it.
And I think with also too just the history that I've seen here is that it's had a lot of European influence from the chefs around the time. And when I see some of these menus, I feel that sometimes the Europeans eat a little bit more savory sometimes for breakfast than sometimes a traditional, like myself being from the Midwest, would do. What I find interesting on that breakfast menu is like grape nut flakes, cream of wheat. I mean, I only eat creamy wheat probably once a year. I don't think probably most people even know what that really is anymore.
Yeah.
And Chef Mengel makes it for me because he likes it. Chef Mengel's been with us for 51 years. He graduated in 77, the apprenticeship program. So he's also too maybe someone we should bring in, just to do something different like we talked about for next year. But I always think it's neat, like we kind of said earlier, just the variety of things that people would have. And I'd love to wish we had more spreads of what it all looked like and things like that. I mean, we see individual pictures, but to see things set up would be kind of neat. Maybe we'll come across that one day.
1940s, things changed drastically as The Greenbrier is no longer the Greenbrier, it becomes Ashford General Hospital. The menu on the left actually was really neat. It was the last meal served before the Army took over the hotel. So it was the last meal as the Greenbrier. And then we move into a couple of the Christmas menus of Ashford General. But I think when you look at those menus, what jumps out, and you look at the picture of the right, the main dining room was the mess hall.
Right.
So what a mess hall that was, and look at the menu, and look at what they're eating. It was pretty amazing what some of the troops here were dining on.
I still don't know what snowflake potatoes are. I have no idea what those are. Snowflake potatoes? I have no idea.
Oh, yeah, somebody asked on Facebook, and we looked it up, and just recently, just the other day.
Oh, really?
And my memory's gone. Google it.
Maybe it's a catch-all.
Huh?
It could be,
Snowflake
yeah.
potatoes could be
Yeah.
anything you make it.
Christmas things, yeah.
The one on the left is sort of, it says, "We bid you adieu as we perform government service." And when I look at that point, nobody knew if there was ever going to be a Greenbrier again. You know, I mean, when they said, "We bid you adieu," who knew how World War II was going to turn out? Remember, this is August of 1942. Things are still pretty iffy at that point. And as I say, people don't, I think, realize that the government bought the Greenbrier. They didn't just lease it, you know. And, you know, there was literally a moment where you had no idea what the future would hold.
Were the chefs the same chefs that were here before?
The only one that I know that had come back was Slausinger. He was the only one that I knew that came back.
I heard the story that, you know, the Army came in and they, I don't know, talked to Schlusinger,
Schlesinger,
Long
so
name
I've got
there.
to pronounce, yeah.
and they didn't think that he was temperamentally able to adjust to Army cuisine. They didn't,
And I understand
they
that.
didn't keep him on.
I understand that.
So that's the question I was kind of going to ask. You see the Christmas menus, and that's really the only menus that I found
Right.
from that time. But what were they dining on a daily basis? Was it?
Well, first of all, the Christmas menu, remember the first patients had just arrived in mid-November, just 5 or 6 weeks. So when I talked to people who were here, they said those first few months, it was still white tablecloth and dining room staff. And then it became much more institutionalized. And yeah. But the fact that they had some menu stock around, I'm sure they just had some around, and I don't think they kept using Greenbrier menu stock for long. And yeah, that's the only picture of the main dining room with the chandeliers. I presume that was just sort of the normal look in there. But I think they're cafeteria style. They put up a hot table in the main dining room.
Okay. Moving on to 1948, and the Greenbrier reopens after Dorothy Draper's redesign, and the menus start to reflect that Dorothy Draper look. This is a menu that Steve and Julie presented to us for the reopening party. And actually, if you're attending the party tonight, the menu is going to look quite similar. But Chef, I know you've studied that menu a lot for tonight's party. What jumps out at you about it?
Well, this one it doesn't have turtle soup tonight, we have turtle soup tomorrow night. This menu did not have that, so we really tried to recreate as closely as we could. I like the fact that there's a lot of cheeses on it, there's a lot of charcuterie items on it, lots of desserts. It's definitely a celebratory menu. We have crab claws, we don't rarely do clams on the half shell, but we have clams on the half shell for tonight in the cameo. I love them. Not everyone, our guests, it's not something I feel would sell very well around here, but for something like this, you know, that's part of the fun part of my job, is being able to do some different things, and maybe it goes over really well, maybe we need to rethink it. But there's also fruit at dinner, you know, so it's honestly, it's a pretty light menu tonight. We have lemon sole almondine, we have some New York strip steaks. Again, that might not sound very light, but to me it kind of is. But it is, they kind of light on an event like this.
And as you look at some of those pictures too, we kind of talked about that in our last presentation, how Dorothy Draper's hands were on everything when she did the redesign. And you see the china, the menus, I'm sure she was heavily involved with what this menu looked like, as she wanted to look every piece possible to have her look, and I think that it is, the menu is a very Draper looking menu for sure.
Well, the one with the red drapery, you see the right, I think that was just for special occasion. Steve, the one on the right here, that's the one that's dated early April 1948?
Yeah, they use those for into the 50s, but that one was from before the opening of the hotel.
Yeah, that's the one, again, I'm gonna kill for this one because,
That's right here, right?
yeah, the one, yeah, what's over here.
It's almost like a soft opening.
And
Yeah.
so it turns out there was, in 1948, when there was a reopening, before the big party, with the Duke and Duchess and the Vanderbilts and the Astors, there was kind of a soft opening. And so the date jumped out at me. I said, we weren't open on April 11th, 1948. Well, we were for this party, and I think the railroad invited kind of their customers and kind of had something of a soft opening. Another thing we never talk about is that's when the Greenbrier became unionized, and they actually struck during that party.
Really?
And
I never knew that.
I met people, staff people, who had to all work in the kitchen that night, and they said, "Oh, we had to work at the reopening party." And I'm thinking, well, it turns out it was this pre-opening party, not the big reopening party.
Now there's
And
some,
that's a pretty rare menu.
yeah. So some of the china, which you still see today, it's in yellow, in pink and in green. There was a set that actually, on the back of it, says for Dorothy Draper,
Yeah.
and it's from the reopening. And some of that original china had a gold rim, 2 gold rims in the china. And the original gold china is gorgeous. And I don't think you can really use it because that gold it will come off
Yeah.
very easily. But if you want to set a table and just have people look at it, it is gorgeous.
And
I mean, it
along
just
that,
pops.
that line, when you leave here, if you get a chance, stop by the tea garden room, the front of the main dining room. There's a lot of the china, a lot of artifacts from over the years on display there that you can just walk through and check out. So definitely make sure you add that to your list.
But that, I don't know if we have, do we have that, the letter from Dorothy coming up on here? Is that, I don't know if we have that.
I'm not sure if it's on the
So,
slideshow or not.
so there's a copy of the letter that everyone should look at. It's the one closest to Mike in the corner there. And that's blown up, but that is the letter that Dorothy sent to the Youngs, the owners of the hotel, or the president, Robert R. Young, and his wife, accepting her invitation to come to the opening of the hotel. And her comment there of, I hope that this hotel becomes everything you wanted it to be. And it's a pretty touching letter. And that was her saying, I will be there for that opening. So that's a pretty special piece there.
We
Steve
know Bob,
showed it to me,
you'd kill for that.
and I almost broke out into tears. I mean, I can't believe you have a letter from, this guy has a letter from Dorothy Draper to Robert. I can't believe it.
1950s we move into now. That is a picture of the dining room in the 1950s. And at the top is a dinner that was held for President Eisenhower, the President of Mexico, and the President of Canada, excuse me, during the North American Summit Conference held here at the Greenbrier. So really an amazing, another artifact in Steve's collection there that is really cool to see.
I think
Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's the picture that has the desert that's covered up there.
Oh, this picture here, the behind the one? Now, the rumor is, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Conte, is that around the time of this menu is when they were developing the bunker, when they were here, correct?
Yeah. I mean,
Some discussion.
yeah. Again, many
You can't
people,
talk about
my
it.
railroad friends tell me the whole reason for this meeting
Right.
was so Eisenhower could take the train from Washington here and see how fast they could get from Washington D.C. to White Sulphur Springs. Back then, they used to change crews in Charlottesville, and they didn't. And so they sort of kind of made up this North American Summit Conference And apparently, remember this Howard Skidmore I was talking about before, he was here for that. And he says he does remember that there was a moment, the Virginia room was right down the corridor from the presidential suite, where there was a period where Eisenhower and Walter Toohey, who was the president of the railroad, the two of them just sat there with nobody else around. And I've always thought that the kind of the handshake, because 2 days after this picture was taken, the first letter is written that introduces the architect of the Capitol to the leadership of Congress, and that's, yeah, so clearly they're connected, you know. And that first letter, incidentally, hangs in Ted Kleisner's house down in Savannah, Georgia today. But yeah, so it seems like the meeting was almost kind of a cover story for the kind of, okay, let's go. I mean, they've been talking about it for a while at this point, but that was kind of let's go.
Chef, I found that menu kind of interesting. Like, if you're feeding 3 presidents from 3 different countries,
Right.
what do you serve on that menu? What jumps out to you about it?
You know, and I wish I could see it a little bit better, because I can't see it on my PowerPoint thing here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, do the whole.
Do you have it? I can grab it here real quick.
It's the big one.
The big one.
Yeah.
While Chef's getting that, this is part of this conspiracy theory of you know, the bunker. But the letter, this is a letter from 1953 from the White House, from James Haggerty
Press secretary.
to this Thomas Deegan. And this is our theory of when this whole bunker thing started, which of course has no basis in fact other than if you wanted to. And it says, "Dear Tom," this is from January 53 from the White House. "Many thanks for your letter of January 26th. Thanks also for your suggestion about the Greenbrier Hotel. I'll see what I can do." So this is our theory that 1953 is when the discussion starts about this, which is no basis in fact other than this cryptic letter from the White House to Mr. Deegan.
Well, you know, Eisenhower had been here 3 times during the Second World War, and George Marshall, who was chief of staff, was here, stayed in Top-Notch pretty frequently. And these guys are general, just out of their very nature, they would have looked at this place and said, this is an interesting place. And it's far away from the coast, which back then they were thinking of bombers coming over. The railroad line comes here. You know, I think in many ways, part of the reason the bunker's here is because of that World War II experience where people who were decision makers, George Marshall and General Eisenhower, they said, "Oh yeah, we know this place. It's a pretty neat place up in the mountains, you know." So yes, it's an interesting. In fact, I've often wondered, you know, why did Mr. Young buy this back? If even at that point in 1948, they were at least thinking, we can use this place.
Yep.
And now, it may be a long way from there to, you know, actually building a bunker, but, you know, it was looking at, you know, there's a little airport here nearby, you know.
Well, there's another connection over there. There's a Eisenhower autographed a photo to someone, and I thought that that's someone that was in the picture. And it says, "To Harry from Eisenhower." And Bob pointed out, well, that's not Harry in that picture. That's Truman Wright. So Truman Wright and President Eisenhower are shaking hands in this picture, but the picture's to Harry. So I asked, of course, Bob, who's Harry? Well, Harry Welch was with the Secret Service and comes to the Greenbrier to become head of security. So one more connection to this whole bunker thing that I think could have helped.
Further, the movie theater below us is underground. You know, even that early, this is years before the bunker. I mean, I have no basis for any of this, but, you know, you start wondering, if
We've got like a whole conspiracy theory.
right. It's all coming out here.
But Jeff, did you have a chance to look at that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we're talking
you know, when you
about this.
first, because sometimes if you have, you know, what I obviously consider, you know, VIP, someone of, where, you know, you always kind of think, do you want to try to offer them something that maybe makes them feel familiar with home, you know, or do you want to do something that is kind of, you know, local around here? That's kind of my philosophy. I'd rather, if someone's going to come visit us, let's show them the best that we can do. But also at the same time, and it's something I was going to get into when I see the 50s, is a couple different things. Number one, I think it's great they have genuine Virginia ham with hearts of palm, and that's really along the lines, it's almost the entree. You know, Virginia ham is an entree, so it's really showcasing, you know, the region, as well as, of course, the roast pheasant. But there's also Gulf Stream pompano, which pompano is a very popular fish around here for about 3 decades, 50s, 60s, 70s for sure. Honestly, I think it's a fantastic fish myself, but what I'm getting at too is that this is the era where it's kind of the opposite of the world that we live in right now, where we're all about, you know, the farm to table. Back then, it was very difficult to get things, so you had a luxury factor that it's like, oh my gosh, they're able to get this from, you know, imagine getting fish. Yeah, I can have it overnighted. I can put in an order today by 1 o'clock, and I can have fish arrive here the next day, you know, by 11. They couldn't do that in the 50s, you know, so how fresh is that pompano going to be when they get here? You know, they probably had a truck ready, you know, all right, throw it on the truck, zip it up here real quick. So those are some things that I noticed. And then there are, whenever you see beluga caviar, you know, you can't get beluga caviar anymore, but they did beluga caviar, goose liver, which I don't know if that was legal back then, because goose liver right now, at least in the form of foie gras, is not legal in the U.S. and it has not been for many years. And then they have quiche Lorraine. You know, so just a very, very cool, interesting menu where, again, I kind of feel like they bring a little bit of the Greenbrier influence into it with having caviar and goose, most likely foie gras, I would think. But again, a simple menu, and then they end with the fruit basket. I don't know why the fruit basket, but.
Another thing I was going to ask about on the other menu, Chef,
Yeah.
is something that jumped out at me is, on the menu is calf's brains country style. So,
Yeah.
So how many ways are there to prepare calf's brains, first of all?
So, honestly, I'm glad you brought that up, because the other thing is, I don't want to mess with this.
And could they not have come up with a better name for it? Could you not call it
Country
something
style?
else?
So I see it being most likely probably poached first, and then probably drenched in flour, and then shallow fried, probably in maybe some lard or just some really nice butter. But also too is back in these older type menus, people really were accustomed to eating all parts of the animal. And you know, this day and age, you know, not everyone realizes, I think, that you know there's only 2 tenderloins in one steer. And out of 1 tenderloin, I can only get really 7 really good 8-ounce steaks. And that's pushing it. So it takes a lot of cattle to really raise the normal stuff that we eat every day. So it's nice to see a lot of things like lamb neck, calf's brains. You see sweetbreads a lot. Sweetbreads, if you ask me what's my favorite offal to eat, it's going to be sweetbreads. It's a little bit more dense than the brains. I do like brains a lot, but it's almost impossible for me to get. I've tried over the years. I've even talked to local guys, but because they're always killing the cattle and the pigs, you know, with a bolt or a bullet to the head, because that way that it is much less stress on the animal. But if you've ever eaten calf's brains, you know, or any kind of brains, I mean, they're absolutely delicious, whether it be cold or hot. I know
I'd be willing to try it. You need to come up with another name for it.
Chicken tenders. And then I'll tell you what they are after you eat them. That's what I did with my daughters growing up. So I wouldn't tell them what I was cooking. Like the first time they had frog legs, I didn't tell them it was frog legs. I told them it was chicken. And they're like, oh, Dad, this is great. What is this again? Oh, it's actually frog legs. Oh, great. When can we have this again?
That's so cute.
And the letter with that menu, Steve, do you remember what that letter was? Was that yours?
Yeah, so this was something that, I don't know, that I think the company maybe is it still in existence, Chef? That's the...
Oh, the Googler and Son.
Yes.
Yeah, this is when they were talking, Herman Roosh, when they were talking about the sausages and
Oh,
stuff.
right, yeah.
I have not heard of that company. You're the one who actually introduced me to that company when you brought this letter a couple
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah.
So this was a letter from Herman Roosh, who was super famous chef of the same kind of caliber as Bryan here, that was here forever. And he was writing a letter to the president of the company in New York, talking about how they served his product here, and then sent him a copy of the menu with his, you know, the name of it, and it's got the company name on there on the actual menu here. And I'm pretty sure that these things were sitting on a wall at this company for a long time.
Yeah. And to Herman Rusch in the letter, if I remember, he talked about how he rarely even uses someone else's name or like brand on there, how it might be like Kraft or something like that, but he actually put the guy's name on the menu. Pretty rare for him.
Yeah.
Actually,
it's
I
a
still
fun-
use this letterhead today, just as a side note.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. You probably have the same letterhead as well too. It's still
Absolutely.
Greenbrier standard, because that's the top, just the addresses change a little bit on the bottom.
And that's over there in that frame next to the Dorothy Draper, if you want to read the letter. That's over there. So.
1960s, we get into a visit from Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, and a menu that they had. Again, chef, another, has to be a little intimidating, feeding the prince and princess. What do you feed them?
Yeah, I mean, they have caviar, they got lobster, they have filet mignon. I mean, they have all the highest end stuff. They have brie as a salad course. They have a nice mousse with some kirsch on it as a dessert. Again, it's, food was pretty simple back then, but it's definitely all about the ingredients. When I see lobster, caviar, filet mignon, and that was some of the rarest stuff, that you could get. Especially when you think of West Virginia and how do you get it here,
Right. The 4th of July menus, I think, are interesting as well. I know Steve has a whole collection of them.
Yeah,
over there.
beautiful design.
That design was used for years and years, and actually, next year for our 4th of July, we're bringing it back. So some of our stuff for next year has that design on it, so.
Now, Chef, do we still offer that Princess Grace meal? Remember several years ago you offered a half a dozen different.
Yeah, still have it in the banquet room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's 5 menus in there. There's the one that we just looked at, the Mexico one. There's one from the Ryder Cup.
It was the Sam Snead.
79. There's a Sam Snead one when we met with Jackson. I forget who that was.
Yeah.
There's that menu, but yeah, there's 5 of them in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is that?
In our banquet rep, we've never sold it. It's a very expensive dinner, but.
So Princess Grace and Prince Rainier, they were at a cocktail party in Philadelphia. Remember, she was from Philadelphia. And I think her father, Jack Kelly, who was in the construction business, knew Walter Toohey, who was president of the railroad. And Mr. Toohey was at the cocktail party up in Philadelphia. And Prince Rainier and Princess Grace say, well, we're going to the Kentucky Derby. So Mr. Toohey says, well, take my private railroad car and stop at my resort along the way. Well, the Greenbrier has 24-hour notice that Princess Grace and Prince Rainier are showing up tomorrow. And son of a gun, the best suite in the hotel, the state suite, happened to be available. And then this dinner was actually served in the presidential suite. And it was strictly a social visit. I mean, they played golf and hung around, but they didn't have the flags of Monaco still flying in the front.
I know we're focused on menus, but the picture there, the aerial from the 1960s, I know there has to be some comments you have on that.
Well, that's classic. I mean, that we used to show off the new West Virginia wing. And, we wanted to make it, seem like totally normal. We're expanding the Greenbrier. We're proud of this. We got this new wing. There were people who said, seeing that little driveway go underneath there were people who were a little nervous about that. I remember our Sharon Rowe, our PR person, wasn't crazy about using that photo. But how many people noticed that funny little, so that's just the entrance to the exhibit hall, and it was part of the story. But it's a great photo all the way down the golf courses, and that's back when the airport, where the Greenbrier Sporting Club golf course is today. For 50 years, there was an airport there, a landing strip there.
Moving on to the 1970s, the big event of the 1970s is the 1979 Ryder Cup, which was a historic Ryder Cup because it was the first one that matched the U.S. and Europe. Prior to that, it had just been U.S. versus Great Britain, but they expanded it to make it a little more competitive. And the first year they did that was here, and some of the menus that they served to the welcome dinner are here. Chef, anything about that Ryder Cup menu that catches your?
We actually, a lot of people have gotten that menu, have used that menu. No, maybe a dozen over the last couple of years that I've had it in the banquet rep. When I see it, it's so simple. We always have to add so many things to it because it just says, like, for instance, Belgian endive and Boston lettuce with a lemon and olive oil dressing. So usually we'll add on there maybe like some fruit that's in season, some other nuts and things like that. Golfers, and I remember at Sneed's years ago when we had a lot of the Master Cup or the Masters menus on how simple golfers eat. You know, prime ribs, you know, steak and potatoes, baked potatoes. So golfers eat very simple. I'm surprised there's not like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on there, to be honest.
I think the last winner of the Masters determines the.
They do, yeah. The menu for the next year, yeah.
right.
And I remember one of the more famous ones of those is Tiger Woods after his first win served hamburgers and milkshakes.
Yep.
I have two questions for Chef
Mhm.
regarding the 60s and the 70s.
Sure.
One of the most spectacular things I've ever seen were the smorgasbords that they did, what they called the golf clubhouse casino, with those snaking tables that wound clear around the room and you eat out open air, and they had, everything was just beautiful, the aspic colored salmon, and I mean, it's just gorgeous.
Right.
Was that during any, I mean, have you seen any?
I've seen some pictures. A lot of them I got from Dr. Bob for sure. And Chef Mengel, I mean, he started here in the 70s, so some of his apprentice work I've seen over the years, and that the aspic and the hands and all that stuff was very popular. I saw tomato aspic actually show up on the previous menu because I always think of the 50s. You know, I think of 57 Chevy and tomato aspic, and I do. I think it's just, you know, reminiscent of that era.
Well, I mean, that was the spectacular thing, and even in the 70s, I think we could fly into the airport, they pick you up in one of those great big green Cadillac limousines, drive you over for lunch, take you back to a little plane, and you fly off. It's only like $24.99 for the beautiful thing. Oh, and they always had heart of palm, when you mentioned heart of palm.
Yeah.
Was that a really popular thing at that time?
You know, stuff that came from Florida, I think was, and I think maybe sometimes too, going back to the question that Cam asked about the menu with the 3 presidents on it, you know, and trying to allure some of the people that came from the southern area, maybe things that were popular down there. Like we see the Florida Everglades frog legs, the Key West turtle soup and things like that. Hearts of Palm, I feel, is very popular back then. And I imagine that they probably got it in fresh, not the canned stuff that a lot of us see in the store. It's a completely different product, getting the canned, or getting the fresh in compared to the canned. The texture's just phenomenal.
Then the other really showstoppers were the culinary team that was in the Olympic competitions, would have their gigantic, all those wedding cakes lined up down the hallway, and you could see all that string work. And,
Right.
I mean, they were, I don't know how many feet tall, like 10 feet tall, I don't know.
Oh, there was one I saw, the Eric Crane.
Eric Crane, yeah, it's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, I mean, it had to be at least 15 feet tall. I mean, it was just a monster of a cake. It was awesome.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Was that Olympic team popular for a number of years, or?
You know, the U.S. Olympic team still goes on. The food there has also evolved tremendously over the years. We actually have Jared Masters, who's a chef at the Sporting Club. He's on the Olympic team this year. And honestly, since like 1978, there's been a Greenbrier culinarian on the Olympic team. Every team except for one. I just can't remember what year that was. It was recently. It was like during COVID. But a lot of stuff was crazy, obviously, for all of us during COVID. And then the year before that, there was 3 apprentices on that team. So yeah.
Well, remember Herman Roosh oversaw feeding the American Olympic team from 1956 till maybe 1980.
Could be, yeah.
And Herman Roosh was an amazing guy. I think he spoke 5 languages, from Switzerland. I think he spoke 5 languages, came to the United States in 1939 for the World's Fair and worked in New York for years, and then came down here in 1955, I think.
55, yeah.
And speaking of these things, that dinner you had the other night for those master chefs, what was it? I mean, that was a pretty impressive lineup.
Yeah, there were some heavy hitters in there.
I kept thinking, God, Kevin must be just sweating away.
Thomas
really.
Keller came in for it. Rosendale, Stoner, Hankey. I mean, there was, 3 previous executive chefs here that were at that dinner.
I mean, Thomas Keller from French Laundry was there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he came.
Right here
Yeah.
Crystal?
Chesapeake Room, yeah,
Oh, okay.
Chesapeake Room,
Oh,
yeah.
that's right, you were there.
Yeah, Lazarus is
So
there
how was the
too.
food?
Oh, it was over the top. It
Oh,
was
yeah?
so good. I mean, I can tell all of you are foodies too, of course. And, you know, just to be present in that room and listen to everybody, you know, talk their stories and everything else, it gives you just such a good background on an appreciation of chefs and what they have to go through. And it was just really impressive. And at the end, all the chefs came out and paraded in the room. And you just wanted to, oh my gosh, just,
So you all actually do like that stuff?
oh, we love that. Are you kidding? Oh my gosh, we were in awe. And the food was over the top. So
It was a
good.
fun dinner.
Yeah.
The
Something
menu on the
special.
right, we hadn't touched on the coffee shop menu. So first of all, what was the coffee shop and what were they serving there?
And where was it?
Where was it?
The coffee shop was where the forum was, so the coffee, and it had been a drugstore, just breakfast and dinner, so that meant you had to have a lunch spot. So that's when the coffee shop was created, 1975, and I still maintain a Facebook picture, and when I put up pictures of that coffee shop, people just go on and on about wonderful memories of the coffee shop. My first experience at the Greenbrier, I lived in Washington before I was here, and my then wife, we went to Pipestem. And on the way back, she said, there's something famous in White Sulphur Springs. Let's see what it is. And we drove up and down the main street, you know, there's nothing famous here, and maybe this Greenbrier place is it. So we go in, and, you know, oh my God, look at this place. So we decided to have lunch in the coffee shop. This is 1976. All I remember is the chicken salad sandwich cost $3.50. And sandwiches went for $1.25 back then. It's like, wow. And then this bread came out, the marble bread. And what the hell's this, you know? It's two different colors altogether. I was like, oh my God, you know, where am I here? And, so that's my first experience at the Greenbrier was lunch in the coffee shop.
So you came back and got a job.
Yeah, right. I want another one of those sandwiches. So it was there until 1990 when the first Drapers was put in, and then it was there until.
You wanted that employee discount if you're going to get
That's
another.
right, yeah, really. Yeah. Do I still get the employee discount? Let's talk
I don't
about it
know,
later.
well, yeah. You get dinner tonight.
It's not as good as it used to be. Yeah.
Oh.
Current menus, as we move into the current time, Chef, I just wanted you to maybe touch on how often are menus updated? What goes into your thought process as you update menus, and then the design of them? What were you looking for in terms of design? Because now, you know, for most of what we're looking at, we're looking at one or two restaurants.
Right.
Now you're looking at way more.
Well, you know, when the Justice family first bought the Greenbrier back in '09, the goal of Mr. Justice was, what we were given was that all the restaurants should look very different. You know, and he had said that if you fly someone in, they don't know where they're at. They should be able to see very different brand concepts. So we've always really tried to stay true to those roots. So you can see just very different, you know, styles of menu. And honestly, these have changed even quite a bit. This is actually relatively new. That's only a year old. This is probably a year and a half old. Prime 44 we just did last year as well too. So we still, like with the Prime 44 West, I still send everything to Karen West. Anytime that we do a menu change, just get her blessing on it, just to make sure. And she's always, you know, super easy to work with, and I just, you know, just being honest with her. And even the menu concept, just to change that up, because it's good to freshen things, which is sending different ideas through. But most menus start off really with seasonality. So most menus will change 3 to 4 times a year. And then you also have to compete with some of the historical items. You know, like we don't change the chicken salad, you know, in Drapers and things like that. So it's like, it's always been a balance based on the clientele. Over the last 20 years, you know, who's coming, who's eating, what are they looking for? With Elmer Capolse, and it has ever since he came here in '16. Since Mr. Kimmick and I worked together, even before that, so we've always done formal tastings where we present the items, we talk about the items together. The chef de cuisine will present them, and then also the front of the house managers are part of that process as well as our sommeliers are also part of that. So they start getting an idea where the menu's going, to think about food and pairings and things like that. And then from there, we really just kind of you know, roll them out. So It's time consuming, but it's very fun. I mean, we're actually right now working on spring menus, believe it or not. It's like, man, we just got through the holidays, and it's like we only have 7 weeks really to get ready to open up Sneed's again. March is creeping up on us. Spring is the hardest menu to do because, especially when you're doing concepts and working on new dishes, I can't get ramps until, depends on how the snow is around here. I can't get them until the end of February sometimes. So sometimes we have to work on our menus, especially in spring, coming out of the winter, is when is the ideal date for those restaurants to start those menus. Because I also don't want to shake everything up so much that we do 3 restaurants in the same week. I try to only do 1 restaurant a week for about 5-6 weeks when changing those menus out. So.
You touched on, sorry.
Oh, no, we have a couple of the older Drapers menus over here too, and a fun postcard, probably from the 90s. But Steve and I are just happy that you guys put out menus. I think when COVID hit and you had to scan and see what was on the menu for someone, we're like, this isn't any fun anymore.
Yeah.
We're just gonna come back to the Greenbrier.
But Chef, you touched on it briefly there, but like we've looked at almost 200 years of menus.
Mhm.
How difficult is that balance to keep those favorites throughout the years while also providing something new and different?
Honestly, it's not that difficult because I have such a respect and such an appreciation for those items that I really, and I mean, I'm doing chicken salad tomorrow at the demo. I was just eating it this morning and I told Nancy, like, man, I just never get tired of this chicken salad. It's just so darn good,
Does everyone know Bryan is having a cooking class tomorrow? You can sign up for it, yes.
I'll be up in the bunker at 2 o'clock. So no, I do. I really feel like that is something I really treat with a lot of respect, and I don't want to change those things until maybe someone tells me to. But I mean, I just do. I love them, and it's to come to the Greenbrier, and a lot of you. I think a lot of you have been here over the years many times, but to have that and come back and be like, oh man, this is the only place I got to eat that. I just want to go here to get that one more time, and then maybe go to another area and try something different.
The continuity,
Yeah, it's important. I mean, that's part of our experience, I think.
Our next slide kind of shows the main dining room and its transformation over the years. A lot of it sort of looks the same. Obviously, it changed some with the Dorothy Draper redecoration, and it's changed some colors over the years. But really, when you look through it, it's a similar theme all throughout. Any major changes, Bob, that maybe jump out to you?
Well, there were lots of changes right there around 2000, 2001. I remember Carlton put a new carpet in. He changed the color. It used to be yellow. I remember I was given a tour once and I said, Carlton painted the walls yellow. And he was standing outside and he said, pineapple. It had been peach and now it's pineapple, And then added the green. And there's old chandeliers that have been there since the 30s. They added green and then added some new green chandeliers. So about a 4-year project, 2000, 2003. They're a pretty dramatic upgrade at that point.
See there where it was just like a big bowling alley there.
Yeah.
George Adams.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then there was a,
see the big one in the middle where the word dining. That's 1913. That's another one of those George Adams menu postcards.
right. Now, of course, it was much smaller because the dining room ended. The main dining room ended where you enter the main dining room today. That was the end of the building in 1913. The original Greenbrier was half the size of the building today in terms of guest rooms.
Dorothy broke all that up. The hotel had just been this big, long room, and she created all those intimate spaces. And you can see the way the dining room looked is just one huge, long room there. There's probably about 30 different postcards in that George Adams series there, the ones with the menus. Most of them don't have the menus attached because people would take them off. But that's just the top menu there of the dining room.
Hey, Bryan, I'm getting a little confused here. Remember that plan that turned the colonnades dining room into a steakhouse?
Yeah, I remember that.
And the plans had gone pretty far. It was right there as CSX was exiting. It didn't happen.
No, we had the blueprints, and the reason it didn't happen was because the old floor couldn't handle all the new equipment.
Oh.
That's why it didn't.
Oh.
Because in order to create two different restaurants, So it was going to be, the Heritage Restaurant was going to be on the Georgia Room side. So that'd be similar to like what the, if you all remember the Tavern Room, very similar to that, tableside Dover soles and things like that, which we, as you can see, we still do in Bryan. And then the left side, the colonnade side, was then going to be, shoot, I don't know if we ever actually finalized a name for it. Internally, we always refer to it as like the Rat Pack feel, cigar bars, and just a lot of leather and smokiness and red wines and things like that. But that's how Chef Timmons always referred to it, as like the Rat Pack. But yeah, that was going to be the steakhouse. But we got all the blueprints done. We had people come in and do all this. And then when the engineers come in, they said, whoa, 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 whoa. No way in heck are you guys able to do that. Because having a double kitchen with all the ovens, stoves, refrigerators, because the left-hand side of the main kitchen, as some of you know, is all cold food, so there's not as much equipment over there. So it was all going to be split up. So that's why it stopped.
Oh,
And then we started going the direction of Hemisphere after that.
okay.
Yeah.
Our final slide is
Aha.
another important piece of the collection of the Lazarus family, the James Montgomery flag painting. And as you see down in the right corner, James Montgomery flag painted the original Uncle Sam. So that's kind of his claim to fame. But that painting there, he painted of the main dining room, which the Lazarus gave to us to put on display. So as you walk into the main dining room right there on the left, you can see that beautiful painting, and we're greatly appreciative of them for letting us use that.
Now, James Montgomery flag, I always say, if anybody remembers the name, it's because of that. That was a World War I Want You poster. But in fact, before magazines could do photograph, they had whole slews of illustrators. And James Montgomery flag was by far the best known illustrator. Apparently he was the best paid illustrator. And then for Vogue and Vanity Fair and all those magazines, they had a whole stable of illustrators. And he was actually a big famous person. And then that particular painting was done in 1949. And he had been here several times. Conte Nast, the publisher, would have golf outings down here, and James Montgomery flag had come down for a couple of those. Anyway, the woman from Cincinnati called up one day and said, I have a James Montgomery flag painting of your main dining room. And I remember going, oh my. Now, what usually happens, the next sentence is going to be, and I want to sell it to you for $30 million. So I panicked and I called Carlson. and Carlson said, we know some people in Cincinnati.
So this is a funny story.
And we got them together.
Yeah, and we went to go pick up the painting, and if you have to look at the little scene because there's a darling little couple having dinner, and supposedly that's James, and James' wife was in a nursing home, but James liked to travel with very beautiful women, and that was his girlfriend, which was their aunt. And she was a model and a show dancer in New York and just gorgeous. So this was one of their prize paintings that they had at their home. And they were like, we just couldn't have anybody have this except the Greenbrier.
So they had a whole bunch of James Montgomery flags. Well, that was...
Yeah, they didn't really have too many at their house.
Okay.
No. And I think the aunt acquired a lot of the paintings because they were together for many years. But this was their special one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, he was an artist, so he would travel with younger, attractive models, and it was a pretty good gig, I think, if you're a good painter, I guess it works. And so that's him with this very.
And the paintings are still on the wall. I mean, we kind of positioned it there partially that day. You see it there because you can look at the painting and you can look at the wall. And you can see the guy in the red is still there. Same paintings are still there. And this was shortly after the Dorothy Dacre redo.
Romance and rhododendrons.
So it turns out that was 2019. That you guys.
Wow. And that's Gertrude right there, who's in that picture. Our son is a lot bigger now. But that was 5 years ago, I guess.